Hi guys, welcome to this video. So GW's put up an article about the Generals Handbook 2017 for Age of Sigmar, and of course in it included some snippets about the Skaven Pestilens. So I want to take a minute just to go through it with you and tell you my thoughts. Right then. As a backdrop for talking about this, I just wanted to set out the army as it is at the moment. Of course, I've got more stuff that I haven't painted, and some of this stuff isn't fully painted, but I thought I'd use it as a nice little backdrop. I can pick the things up I'm talking about as we go. So, let's start off. Now, one of the biggest changes that they've said is that you can only use one of each artifact in your army. Now, as a Skaven player, we relied very heavily on taking several of the crowns from the Chaos artifacts. And what that basically allowed you to do was to get Inspiring Presence off multiple times from each, or at least twice from your Warlord, and then a time each from your other heroes. You allowed 2 abilities for anyone wearing wearing the crown, basically. So that's a massive hit because these guys don't have much bravery at all, and they go down really quick, having no saves at all. So yeah, we need something to make up for that. Now, handily, GW also released some of the allegiance abilities that these guys have, and one of those things is strength in numbers. Now, usually you get +1 for every 10 models in a unit, but now the Skaven Pestilens and also some of the other Skaven units get +2. So if I'm taking a unit of 20, as long as none of, well, some of them are going to die, but essentially instead of being bravery, I think it's 5, they're going to be bravery 7, as long as I've got more than 10 on there. Now, what this does mean is I'm going to need to buy more of these little ratties, because as you can see, I've only got 20 of each. So I've got 20 of the Censer Bearers, you can see here, that I've converted from the monk kits. And I've also got 20 of the actual monks themselves. So I'm going to need more of those. And also that goes hand in hand with the, I think it's large regiments rule, whereby if you take a full unit size, you get some points off, which might be handy for these guys, because the full unit size on these guys is 20, and I've got 20 there. So that might help. You never know. And it also highlights the fact that if this is a full unit and this is half a unit, I've only really got 2 battle lines. Because one of the things I've noticed as well is that they've actually increased the minimum for each, which is a pain in the backside. So I'm going to need more of these little fellas. I've finally come up with a little paint scheme that I actually like on these, which I'm just showing you now. Involves a lot of dry brushing, but yeah, I've even been working on the teeth and the tongues and things as well. So I'm really happy with that. So that's the first of the traits, essentially. The second is called Echoes of the Great Plagues. Now what that means is, when you do a prayer from one of your priests, or any of the priests as I understand it, if you roll a 6, you can do one of the great plagues as well as the spell you were going for, which is awesome. So I'll quickly just go over the other great plagues as well. First one is a Red Maw Plague. Essentially what this means is you can do a prayer, and as long as you're doing it closest to an enemy hero, or as long as you're doing it to an enemy that's not got any of your units around it, it basically attacks its own units, which is pretty awesome. Something you can use in close combat, especially if you're doing some clever maneuvering and removal of casualties. You can really game it so that the enemy hero is going to fall for it, essentially. Although you need to be rolling 6s to get it off, so it's not a great one. The second one is Never Plague, which basically allows you to add 1 to the prayer rolls for one of your priests for the rest of the game. So basically only failing on a 1, which gives you the mortal wound, which is awesome. The third one is called Bubonic Blight Plague. This one is like the plague that the Vermin Lord gets, except it's a little bit harder to get spreading. So on this guy, essentially it just keeps spreading as long as there's units within a certain distance from each other, and keeps doing mortal wounds to mortal wounds, jumping around the battlefield. The Blight Plague basically means you have to wipe out a unit, and then roll to see if it spreads. So it's not as easy to get off. But there it is. I think probably Never Plague is going to be the one that I use there most if it goes off, to be honest, just to make future prayers more likely. Or if you're going for a really awesome moment, you can take control of an enemy hero and attack a unit close by, which is just fantastic. So now I'm going to move on to the artifacts. So that's the traits that we saw. The artifacts, they only really showed us 2 on the article. First one is the Living Cyst. I forget its name. It's got a really convoluted name, but essentially it's a living cyst. And what it does is it's this cyst which talks to the plague priest it's attached to, and essentially gives him a fever. It sort of whispers in his ear, drives him into a crazy fever, and makes him quicker, so 2 inches quicker on the table, and also adds re-rolling of 1s to his. I think it's the hit rolls. Now I can't see that one being that much of a help, especially since at the end of each turn, or the beginning, I'm not sure which one, if there's another hero within 12 inches, he jumps to the other hero as well. So it's really unreliable. It's going to be jumping around the battlefield. You need to be really careful on the distance you keep between your heroes. But it's all good fun. It's quite a funny one. The next one is the Liber Bubonicus. And what this does is it allows you to make one of your heroes into a plague priest, so that they can cast the pestilent prayers. And what the pestilent prayers are is you've got one which is called Wither, which means that it's +1 to wound on a selected unit within 13. The other one is a sort of area of effect plague bomb, essentially. You choose a point, and then within 2 inches of that you roll to see if you do mortal wounds to the things around it. So in that instance, the Vermin Lord is actually a wizard, but you can make him into a priest as well, so he can be doing spells, and he can also be praying on the same turn. Now if you do it to a plague priest who's already got pestilent prayers, he can now do 2 pestilent prayers every turn, which is pretty cool. So that means that you're more likely to roll those 6s to get off those echoes of great plagues, which is pretty awesome. Now, one of the things I thought when I first saw this, I was thinking, oh, that means I can use the prayers on this bad boy, because the prayers that come out of this are actually really powerful. However, they've got a different name. So there's one prayer which is called Rabid Fever, and it basically means that when your Skaven die in close combat, they do a full attack back. And these guys die in close combat very, very easily. So it's just an extra, like, you always get to attack, basically, regardless of whether you go first in combat, which is pretty awesome. Unfortunately, that's not the case. However, you can make this into give it pestilent prayers, so you could be doing 2 prayers every hero phase, I think. Now, someone on the Facebook said that it can be doing 2 prayers for the pestilent prayers, and also its own prayer, because what it says is if it's a plague priest, sorry, it can do 2. Well, that's got the key word of plague priest. So if that's the case, then he can be doing 2 of the pestilent prayers plus his own prayers, which is pretty awesome. That's 3 prayers a turn. That's absolutely mental. But we'll see. So yeah, so that's basically the stuff that we've got. Now, one thing that Skaven players were pretty happy about is the fact that, especially if you play Mulder, now previously Mulder could only use, I think it was giant rats or rat swarms as their battle line. Now they've been given rat ogres. So those players who wanted to rumble across the battlefield using only the big old, oh, he's not painted, but I'll show you these fellas. Just using these as their battle line, that's going to be awesome. So you can actually make a Skaven army, a bit like the Scryer one that uses the Storm Vermin, not the Storm Vermin, the I forget what they're called, but the big fellas with the big guns that do loads of mortal wounds. Now you can have a second Skaven army, which is basically an elite army with few monsters, which is pretty cool. So you can get loads of those fellas and rampage down the battlefield, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm going to make some more updates as more come out. Of course, I'm going to get hold of the Generals Handbook next week when it does come out, and hopefully I can get a better picture of the other 4 of the artifacts that are available for these guys, because of course at the moment I've only seen those 2. But it's looking positive that we're going to get some good artifacts to make up for the the fact that we're losing the ability to take a crown on each one of the heroes for the different battalions. So that's always a bonus. It's very, very thematic as well. I love how thematic these ones are. It's all about the plague and the craziness with the cyst that jumps from person to person. So yeah, I am really excited. Hopefully that's given any Skaven Pestilens players an idea of what's coming for them, at least a good starter. And like I say, when I got more information, I'll do another video and update it with all the missing bits and my thoughts on the individual parts as well. Right then, thank you very much for watching. Keep up with me in between videos over here, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Stay well, guys.